Scene opens in a dimly lit, dingy bar on a distant space station. A scarred and weary alien veteran named Gorak the Hammer slouches in his seat, nursing a strange blue drink. Across from him sits Lars Green, a human journalist with a notebook in hand. Lars. All right, Gorak. You said you wanted to talk. So tell me, why did your people lose the war? Gorak snorts, his claws tapping against the glass. Lose? That's too soft. We didn't just lose. We were crushed. And do you want to know why? Lars leans forward. Why? Gorak narrows his eyes, voice dropping. Because of your kind, humans, the so-called primitive species who made the galaxy's finest military look like amateurs. The camera pans to a cracked photo of Gorak's old squad on the wall behind him, now just a memory. Lars, but you had the advantage, right? Better ships, better tech. Everyone thought humanity was outmatched. Gorak, bitter laugh. Thought being the key word. We were fools. Let me explain something about humans. Gorak sets down his drink with a thud, his voice filled with both anger and a strange, grudging respect. Gorak, you don't just fight wars. You become them. We thought you were like the rest of us, logical, predictable, controlled. But humans, you're none of those things. You fight like wild animals, like artists painting with chaos. Lars raises an eyebrow, intrigued. Lars, artists. Of what? Gorak leans forward, mandibles twitching. Of war. Humans make killing an art. Long before you ever left your own planet, you were perfecting it. Every tribe, every nation, every era of your history. It was all about finding newer, deadlier ways to destroy each other. Spears, swords, guns, tanks. You even built weapons that could wipe out entire cities. Lars, frowning. We called it progress. Gorak barks out a humorless laugh. Progress? That's one word for it. Do you know what the rest of us called it? Madness. While we were designing elegant weapons and flawless strategies, you were taking brutality to new heights. And you didn't stop there. The camera zooms in on Gorak's claws gripping his glass tightly. Gorak, we first met your kind during the Battle of Arcanis Prime. Our generals thought it would be an easy victory. Your fleet was smaller, your weapons outdated. You were doomed, or so we thought. Lars, but what happened? Gorak pauses, staring into his drink as if reliving a nightmare. You threw rocks at us. Big, heavy chunks of metal dropped from space. No warning, no fancy energy beams, just pure kinetic force. One hit, and entire warships vanished in an instant. We called them rods from God. Lars scribbles furiously in his notebook, fascinated. Lars, rocks? That sounds primitive. Gorak snarling. Primitive? That's what we thought too. But tell me, Lars, does it matter how primitive a weapon is when it works better than anything we've ever seen? Those primitive rods tore through our shields like paper. By the time we realized what was happening, half our fleet was gone. The scene flashes to a battlefield in space, where flaming wreckage of alien ships drift silently as more rods rain down from above. Gorak, voice shaking with frustration. And that was just the beginning. Humans didn't care about honor or tradition like we did. You cared about winning, and you were damn good at it. The camera cuts back to the bar, where Gorak finishes his drink and glares at Lars. Gorak, you want to know what makes humans the most terrifying warriors in the galaxy. It's not your technology. It's not your numbers. It's your mindset. You don't fight because you have to. You fight because you want to. And that makes you unstoppable. The camera lingers on Lars, who sits frozen, realizing this is only the beginning of Gorak's story. The scene remains in the dimly lit bar. Gorak refills his drink, his claws clinking against the glass. Lars sits forward, hanging on to every word. Lars, so you're saying we won because we're unpredictable? Gorak chuckles darkly. Unpredictable doesn't even begin to describe it. You're a species that doesn't just think outside the box. You destroy the box and set it on fire for good measure. Let me give you an example. The camera shifts to a flashback. Alien fleets in perfect geometric formations glide through space, their ships gleaming and symmetrical. Gorak, voiceover. When we first engaged your forces, we used our most advanced strategies. Perfect formations, optimized by centuries of logic, and our most brilliant tactical minds. Every ship was in its place, every move pre-calculated. The flashback changes to human ships, crude in design, unevenly spaced, and chaotically maneuvering. Gorak voiceover, and then you showed up. Your ships didn't follow any pattern, no symmetry, no predictable formations. It was chaos. Our AIs couldn't even compute your movements, and when we finally closed in, thinking we had you cornered. Cut to human ships intentionally colliding with alien vessels, detonating their reactors in desperate, brutal attacks. Gorak, you rammed us. Who does that? Who weaponizes their own failure just to cause damage? The scene shifts back to the bar, where Gorak is gesturing wildly, his frustration growing. Gorak, you don't just fight, you adapt. You don't care about rules or logic. You use whatever works, no matter how insane it seems. Lars, give me another example. Gorak leans forward, his voice lowering. All right, Lars. Let me tell you about the Battle of Sarenfave. We had the high ground. Better numbers, better weapons, better positioning. By all accounts, you should have surrendered. But instead, you did something we never saw coming. The camera flashes back to the battlefield. Human soldiers are digging trenches in the dirt, setting traps, and camouflaging themselves in the mud. Gorak, voiceover. You didn't even try to match us in open combat. You lured us into the forests, into the mountains, places our tanks and drones couldn't follow. And then, you turned the terrain itself into your weapon. You made traps out of trees, ambushed us from rivers. You used fire to choke the air. By the end, our soldiers were afraid to step forward because every shadow felt like a death trap. The scene shows alien troops panicking as explosions and ambushes tear through their ranks. Humans emerge, grimy but victorious. Gorak, you turned our own confidence into a weakness. That's the thing about humans. You don't fight fair. And it's not because you can't. It's because you choose not to. Lars scribbles furiously, processing every word. Lars, but isn't that just survival? You'd do the same if the roles were reversed. Gorak slams his glass down, his voice rising. No, Lars, we wouldn't. That's what you don't get. The rest of us follow rules, honor, strategy, logic. It's how we've evolved. But you see a battlefield and you think, how can I break it? The camera cuts to Gorak staring into Lars's eyes, his tone filled with a mix of fear and admiration. Gorak, you don't just fight to survive, you fight to win, and that makes you terrifying. The bar grows quieter as Gorak's tone turns darker. The alien veteran leans back, his claws tapping rhythmically on the counter. Lars notices his uneasy expression. Lars, you keep mentioning fear. Was that really such a big factor? Gorak laughs bitterly. Fear wasn't just a factor. It was your greatest weapon. You humans didn't just fight us on the battlefield. You fought us in our minds. You made us afraid to even face you. Flashback to an alien trench on a battlefield, dimly lit by the eerie glow of distant explosions. Alien soldiers huddle together, trembling, as distant human music echoes through the air. Gorak voiceover. We first heard it during the siege of Talon Ridge. A human force, smaller than ours by half, pinned down with no chance of escape. But instead of retreating, what did they do? They started playing music, loud haunting songs that echoed across the battlefield. The camera zooms in on alien soldiers exchanging nervous glances as they hear humans singing, "Blood upon the risers." Gorak, do you know what that does to a soldier's mind, Lars? To hear the enemy laughing, singing songs about death, while you're the one shaking in your boots. By the time we launched our attack, half of our forces couldn't even aim straight. We'd already lost before the first shot was fired. Lars, music, You're saying music won the battle. Gorak grits his teeth. It wasn't just the music. It was the message behind it. You humans treat war like a game. You celebrate it, mock it, turn it into stories and songs. That makes you impossible to predict, impossible to understand. Flashback to another battlefield. Alien troops cautiously advance, only to find human traps, holographic decoys, fake transmissions, and misinformation spreading like wildfire. Gorak, voiceover. And then there was the Battle of Kelros 4. We thought we had your communications cracked. Our AIs intercepted every transmission, every signal. But you knew we were listening. So what did you do? You fed us lies, false troop movements, fake supply chains, even made up messages about secret weapons. The flashback shows alien commanders panicking as they chase phantom threats, wasting their forces while real human strikes hit their weak points. Gorak, you turned our own intelligence against us. By the time we realized the truth, it was too late. You didn't just beat us, Lars. You broke us. Lars pauses, his pen hovering over the notebook. Lars, you make it sound like we're monsters. Gorak narrows his eyes. Not monsters, artists. That's the difference. You don't see war the way the rest of us do. To you, it's not just a matter of life and death. It's a puzzle, a stage, a canvas. And fear. Fear is your paint. The camera cuts to Gorak leaning forward, his voice a low growl. Gorak, you made my people afraid of shadows, afraid of noises, afraid of each other. That's not just war, Lars. That's domination. And the worst part? Lars. What? Gorak pauses, his voice trembling. You didn't do it because you had to. You did it because you wanted to. Because you could. And that's what makes you terrifying. The camera lingers on Gorak's haunted expression as Lars sits in stunned silence, realizing just how deep humanity's psychological warfare cut into their enemies. Gorak stares into his empty glass, his claws tightening around it as if trying to crush it. The bar hums with faint noise, but neither he nor Lars notice. Lars breaks the silence. Lars, you're saying humans didn't just fight differently. You're saying we think differently. Gorak nods slowly. Exactly. You see, the rest of us, we follow patterns. We build our strategies based on centuries of experience, passed down and refined by our leaders, our scholars, our generals. But you humans. Gorak leans forward, his eyes narrowing as he speaks with a mix of awe and fear. Gorak, you rewrite the rules. You don't care about traditions or doctrines. You care about winning, and you'll do anything to win. The camera cuts to a flashback of human forces. In the middle of a chaotic battlefield, a human commander stands over a holographic map, furiously moving pieces around while shouting orders. Gorak, voiceover. I saw it myself during the siege of Orak's Maw. We had the high ground, a fortified position, impenetrable defenses. There was no way for you to win. At least that's what we thought. The scene flashes to human engineers dismantling their own artillery and repurposing it to build a massive makeshift railgun, cobbled together from scrap metal and stolen alien components. Gorak, voiceover. But you didn't attack our walls. You didn't even fight us head-on. You built something we'd never seen before, a weapon so crude, so reckless, that our defenses didn't stand a chance. One shot, just one shot, and the entire outer wall came crashing down. Back in the bar, Gorak shudders, gripping the counter as if steadying himself. Gorak, that's the thing about you humans. You're not limited by what you know. You're always looking for what's possible. While the rest of us stick to tradition, you innovate, experiment, and sometimes fail spectacularly. But when you succeed, you're unstoppable. Lars, frowning. That sounds resourceful. Gorak, snarling. Resourceful? That's one word for it. Reckless is another. But it works. Do you know how many of my people underestimated you because we thought you were primitive? That your willingness to risk everything was a weakness? Turns out it was your greatest strength. Flashback to another battle. Human forces retreat strategically, leading alien troops into a massive canyon. Explosives detonate, collapsing the walls and burying the aliens alive. Gorak, voiceover. You used everything. The terrain, the weather, even our own arrogance. And when you couldn't use those, you used yourselves. I've seen humans fight until they had nothing left. Not weapons, not ships, not reinforcements, just their fists. And somehow, they still found a way to win. Back in the bar, Gorak lets out a shaky breath, his mandibles twitching as he meets Lars's gaze. Gorak. But it's not just your adaptability, Lars. It's your mindset. You don't see war as a tragedy. You see it as a challenge, a puzzle to solve. And for some of you, it's even worse. For some of you, it's fun. Lars shifts uncomfortably, his pen pausing over his notebook. Lars. Fun. You think we enjoy war? Gorak leans closer, his voice dropping. Some of you do. And those are the ones we fear the most. The ones who laugh in the face of death. The ones who sing songs about their own destruction. The ones who make war games for entertainment. To you, combat isn't just survival. It's sport. The camera pans to a group of humans at the other end of the bar, arm wrestling and laughing as they place bets on the outcome. Gorak. Look at them. It's like they can't help themselves. Even in peace, they're still competing, still training, still preparing for the next fight. And that's what makes you terrifying, Lars. You're always ready. Lars sits back, his expression uneasy as he processes Gorak's words. The veteran drains his drink, slamming the empty glass onto the counter. Gorak, you want to know why the galaxy fears humanity? It's because no matter how advanced we are, no matter how powerful our weapons or strategies might be, we'll never be able to match the way you think. That's why we lost. The bar falls silent as Gorak's voice grows heavier. Lars looks up from his notebook, sensing the weight of what's coming next. Lars. So, that's it? You're saying humans won because we think differently, because we adapt. Is that the only reason? Gorak, shaking his head. No, Lars. That's not the only reason. It's the biggest. But there's more to it. You don't just adapt, you endure. You keep fighting long after anyone else would have given up. Long after it stops making sense. The camera flashes to an alien war council. Generals argue about retreating from a battle they believe is unwinnable. The scene shifts to human soldiers, battered, outnumbered, and bleeding, but still advancing through a rain-soaked battlefield. Gorak, voiceover. We've seen it over and over again. When others would retreat, you press forward. When others would surrender, you fight harder. You don't stop, no matter the cost. Back in the bar, Gorak looks down at his claws, his voice quieter now. Gorak, do you know what it's like to face an enemy like that, Lars? To throw everything you have at them, ships, soldiers, strategies, and they still keep coming. It's like trying to hold back a storm with your bare hands. Eventually you realize there's nothing you can do. Lars hesitates, his pen still as he processes Gorak's words. Lars. And that's why you call us gods of war? Because we keep fighting? Gorak lets out a bitter laugh. No, Lars. It's not just that. It's because you've turned war into something greater. You don't just fight battles. You shape history. You write stories. You build legends. The camera flashes to human war memorials, soldiers saluting fallen comrades, and civilians telling stories of heroism. Alien children listen to these tales, their eyes wide with awe and fear. Gorak, voiceover. Even now, long after the war is over, your people still talk about it. You tell your stories, sing your songs, and build monuments to your victories. And you know what that does? It ensures that no one ever forgets. The scene cuts back to the bar. Gorak gestures toward the humans laughing and singing in the corner. Gorak, you've made us fear not just your weapons, but your legacy. Every soldier who fought you tells the same story. They say, if you ever see a human, you either run or surrender, because if you fight them, you'll lose. Lars leans forward, his curiosity pushing him to ask one last question. Lars, do you think we'll ever change? That we'll stop being terrifying? Gorak leans back in his seat, a faint smirk playing across his face. Gorak, no, Lars, and you shouldn't. You've already done something no other species has ever managed. You've shown the galaxy that it's possible to be both civilized and dangerous, to build beautiful things while still being capable of destroying them. That's why we call you the gods of war, because you've transcended it. Lars sits in stunned silence as Gorak stands, his posture weary but resolute. He turns to leave, then pauses at the door. Gorak, just one more thing, Lars. If you ever find yourself in a fight with a human, don't surrender immediately. Because if you don't, they'll take whatever you're fighting with, figure out how it works, improve it, and then use it against you. The camera cuts to the humans in the bar, laughing and arm wrestling. One starts humming a tune, and soon the group joins in, singing a rowdy, half-remembered song. Gorak glances back at them and lets out a quiet sigh. Gorak to himself. And they'll probably be singing while they do it. He walks out into the station's cold, dim corridor, leaving Lars alone at the bar. Lars looks at the humans, then down at his notes, and finally up at the stars visible through the viewport. He whispers to himself, Lars, gods of war, and we'll never see anything like them again. The screen fades to black, with a final line of text appearing. Humanity, the galaxy's most terrifying warriors, and its greatest hope for peace.